Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Retail. This is Matt Pfeiffer, and I'm here with my guest today, Rick West, the co-founder and CEO of Field Agent. Rick, how are you?
Doing great today. Listen, Matt, thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for making the time. Like I said, when we talked, I've admired you for a long time, just based on what you have accomplished at Field Agent and of course, North Star and Core 4 before that. I've developed tremendous respect for you. You've always been really good to me when I've asked for help
Appreciate that.
and counsel. And I've heard a lot of people, anytime I ask about you, it's like, he's a good man. He's a really good man. And he's got this ability to rally a team around a big vision. But I don't know you. And I thought, what a great opportunity for you and I to spend some time together, and for me in the process to get to know a lot more about you as a human. And I think the community is going to be really excited to hear that as well. So I wanted to start with, the things that made you would go back to your childhood, growing up in Eastern Kentucky. I'd just like to hear about, those formative years and some of the experiences that you might have had along the way that helped you kind of prepare for the road ahead in any aspect of your life.
Sure. And I'm an analogy guy, Matt. So I'm going to give folks a couple of analogies, and if they enjoy movies and TV, then they're going to love this conversation. So, but my growing up was somewhat of a mix between Friday Night Lights and Hillbilly Elegy. So it's a classic town in Eastern Kentucky. I grew up in a holler in Kentucky. The head of the holler would be grandfather on my dad's side of the family were all railroaders. My dad was a railroader. And that's kind of how they grew up. I have one brother, and he's a coal miner today. He's probably about a mile down on the mountain right now, digging metallurgical coal that allows us to melt steel. If it wasn't for him, wouldn't be having any steel right now. And so he's literally down on the mountain digging coal as we speak. And so that was kind of that upbringing. And I use that as the Hillbilly Elegy analogy. If you've read the book or seen the movie, it's a very distinct culture. It's a culture of you've got tribes, and you're proud of that culture, and you kind of stick to it. And so I did that cross with Friday Night Lights to say we were also a 3-sport school, and on Friday nights everyone went to the football game. And that was just kind of who you were. That's how you went into battle. So if you take that from an analogy standpoint, that's kind of me growing up as a kid. Now I start that out by saying that grew up with great parents. Listen, they did what they could do to take care of us, but also growing up it was tough. It was not for the faint of heart when you're young, because you don't know what you don't know. I look back at it, and you wonder how you made it through, right? But as a kid, listen, we ran in the mountains and we had a great time, and so all that was good. So I start out by saying that. The next phase of that, as you look back and you start looking at life lessons as you're going along, one thing that I tell people, my dad passed away when I was 29, but I'm going to tell this story now. But my dad died an alcoholic. He died when he was 63. I was 29. Can never remember a time that he didn't have a beer in his hand. But never remember a time. I guess there's 2 times I can remember that he was actually drunk. Once he had to play Santa Claus in the Elks Club. He wasn't happy about playing Santa. And one time on a weekend when the water pipe broke outside of our house, and he's outside in the middle of the night having to work in the middle of winter to take care of something. But he was a happy-go-lucky guy. But I knew growing up that I didn't want to be like my dad, which is unfortunate in many ways. But I knew I just didn't want to work on the railroad. I didn't want to come home and drink. I also knew that I didn't want to work in the coal mines. I just did not want. I mean, I had buddies when I graduated high school. They were saying, Rick, you're going to go to college. At best, you're going to make $18,000 a year, maybe $20,000 a year getting out. After 4 years of college, I'm 18 right now, making close to 40. I've got a brand new Corvette, got a brand new motorcycle. I've got my trailer up on this lot up here. Life is great. You're crazy. I'm printing money right now. But man, I knew I just didn't want to go do that. So unfortunately, when I tell that story, is that there are a lot of things about my life and what was happening there that I just knew I just didn't want to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. Listen, my brother's a great man. Very proud of him. I look up to him. He's younger brother, but still look up to him. And he works hard every single day. But I just knew that I didn't want to go do that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, me as a young kid. I'm gonna, pause for a second there and kind of let you reflect on that a little bit. And then as your listeners and people are hearing me go through this, you realize there's a tipping point in your life that says, well, if you're not going to do that, what are you going to do?
Hmm.
Well, again, if you think of those stories, you're like, well, what am I going to do? I mean, I guess I'm going to go to school, but I don't know what format. I mean,
Hmm.
it wasn't like there was this huge plan, for me to go figure something out. I just knew I needed to go to school. And so what happened was, starting about 12, 13, you started to actually do real work, and you started to learn what work was for the first
Hmm.
time. And also always tell students when I spend time with them is that um, your next job or your first job and your success is really built on relationships. And I learned really on at about 12, 13 that relationships were really the deciding point in everything you did, whether it was sports, whether it was school, getting a job, like your community of guys you're hanging out with. The relationships started to matter. And to this point, it's kind of interesting, Matt. I've never had to send in a resume and pursue getting a job.
Interesting.
From the time I was 12 years old, from the paper route to the mining supply job to the job on campus at school to P&G, I've never had to pursue.
Hmm.
Relationships said, "Hey, Rick, you'd be great at this. Let me introduce you. You really should go look at this."
Hmm.
But again, I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
So that's kind of me as that 10, 12-year-old living in a mining community, head of this holler, running wild, having a great time. Friday Night Lights with Hillbilly Elegy mixed into it, really trying to figure out what I was going to do.
Hmm. Well, how did you end up at the University of Kentucky and the major that you declared in human resources?
Mhm. Yeah. So I often tell people there's really, well, two factors. Number one, I wanted to go for the basketball tickets.
Hmm.
That was really important.
There you go.
But in my class, we had a couple hundred that graduated, and probably 25 or 30 of those went on to kind of a D1 school of some sort. And there were a handful that went to community college, but for the most part, people went on to get jobs in the work, which was great. And I knew in choosing a school, I wanted to go to a larger state school um, as opposed to a smaller community college or a smaller, D2, D3 school, simply because of the academics and what I was going to be able to go do. And I was one of these kids that um, grew up with a 3.9166 GPA in high school, only made two Bs, and I can explain why, but that's another story for another day. But when I went to school, I realized, well, I may as well major in engineering, Matt, because that was just, you can make a lot of money being an engineer. And I can remember vividly that first week in calculus, first week in chemistry, where they covered everything that I covered my entire high school career in the first week. And all the other kids from larger areas basically had the entire semester as like a repeat. And I realized I'm in so much trouble. Matt, I didn't have to, all through high school, never had a final, never had a comprehensive final. I just memorized things as fast as I could to get through the test. Everything worked through. I was completely out of my league. So I tell people that really I did pre-business, which was engineering. So there are a ton of engineers that ended up in business when you
Right.
realize when you do Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3, now you're doing physics. And in between class, every one of the classes are talking about physics and engineering. And I'm just trying to go see my girlfriend.
Right.
I said, I'm in so much trouble, so much trouble. So switch to business and personal. At that time, today it would be called like organizational effectiveness. It was
Okay.
kind of an HR, personal industrial relation thing. Loved managing people. I've been doing all my life. Captain the football team. I mean, this running teams, and so I wanted to run a team. And I knew if I went down that OE kind of personnel side, I could go do that. Now, in parallel with that, I'm also a kid that's going to college, and you wouldn't know this by the shirt I've got on now, but I I went to school and did not have one shirt that had a button.
Hmm.
Had t-shirts, Who concert t-shirts, football jerseys, basketball jerseys, had my Lee jeans and high top tennis shoes. And I went to a very, very preppy school. And people wouldn't, even understand this as, thinking about Kentucky, but it was, Madras shorts, polo shirts. You'd wear 3 polos with them all flipped up, coat and tie to football games. It was just a totally different world. And so when I went there, I completely stuck out like a sore thumb. My accent was terrible. It was a very twangy Eastern Kentucky, rotten knot, kind of a, accent coming into that. And I realized that even on my dorm floor, I had, guys that kind of brought me along, but they're like, dude, you've got to like, you got to back off a little bit of that. I said, okay. And then even from what you wear and how you fit in, I just realized coming into it, I left school being one of the most popular kids in school, very, very successful, to a kid that wasn't sure if he was going to make the grades to stay in school. I wasn't sure if I was ever going to have any friends other than the 3 guys from high school. And so you fast forward a little bit, and I had guys on my floor that wanted me to rush a fraternity. And, Matt, at the time I knew Animal House. You either had, John Belushi in that crew, or you had Matheson in the other crew.
Right.
And I just didn't want to go on that path, but I met some really interesting guys, and he said, listen, I really think you can do this. We'd love to have you be a part of our fraternity. And the other fraternities were never going to look at me. He said, but you need some help. I said, okay, I'm all ears. So Matt, he took me to the Fayette Mall in Lexington, Kentucky, took me into the mall. And there was a store there called Doll Hairs, and there was like a Dillard's type store. And he helped me buy a pair of duck head khakis, which were fantastic, by the way. A pair of Bass Weejan shoes. You didn't need socks because you wore, loafers without socks. 2 button-down shirts, a blue one and a white one, a couple of ties, and a blue blazer. And here's an 18-year-old guy that took another 18-year-old guy, and he took me shopping. And he said, Rick, you can do this. And his name is Mark King. I've tried to find him on social media recently, and I cannot get a hold of him, but just a great guy. And that was one of those tipping points that he just said, hey, you can do this. Let me help you. And then from there, went down the fraternity route, went into business, which was my forte, everything. I was hitting on all cylinders, met my wife in Kentucky. Everything was just, fantastic, and had a great final 2 years of school. But the first year and a half was tough, really tough, trying to figure out what I was going to do.
So how did P&G find you?
Yeah. So you're at Kentucky, and it's about an hour and a half south of Cincinnati. And at that time, the way P&G recruited, you had various people within the executive level that always wanted to recruit at their schools. And we had one of the guys in the organization that had graduated from Kentucky some years ago that was going to be coming to campus. And I really didn't know much about them, but my fraternity president had interviewed with P&G and was working with them. And he said, listen, Rick, he said, you would be perfect for what we're trying to do here. And I said, I don't even know what P&G is. I couldn't tell you. And it wasn't like you had the internet to go look it up. So I went to the business school. It was some form of like a DMB type book. I looked up P&G and realized they made Tide and made Crest. But again, P&G, the brand was in the very back of the Crest bottle. You could barely see it.
Right.
And I said, okay, I see what's going on here. And I said, well, what kind of job is it? He said, listen, we're looking for people that can manage teams and lead. And he said, Rick, you're a leader. Now, at that time, Matt, I had been a resident advisor for a couple of years. I was vice president of my fraternity. I was doing well in school. I was running the HR part for students within the university to do part-time jobs. I mean, so I had all these leadership things in front of me. He said, fill out this form, send it in, and I'll make sure that you get an interview with P&G. I'm like, well, I guess. I mean, sure. I just filled out a form, sent it in, had no idea what was going to happen with that. And I get this call saying, hey, love what you're going on. This guy, Charles Dukas, it was his name. He said, highly recommend you. We love Charles, and Charles wouldn't steer us wrong. why don't you come to Cincinnati for an interview? Now, at that time, Matt, I had more than one pair of duckhead khakis and had a couple of blazers, but I didn't have a suit, and I sure didn't have a pair of wingtips.
Hmm.
And at those days at P&G, it was a suit, wingtips, polished, pinpoint polished cotton. You hit your collar, it starch, it hit, and it hurt your finger when you clicked it.
Hmm.
So I went out and made a purchase. The guy helped me, another friend of mine that was in the area helped me find a suit, get organized to go do that. And I drove to Cincinnati for this interview. And what was interesting with it, Matt, is that I thought, okay, I'm just going to go up for a quick interview. How hard can this be? I drove up the night before, checked in that next day, came in. And so I was interviewing. And the first 30 minutes worked out well. And the guy said, hey, could you stay for another interview? I said, sure. So I go in for another interview, and I'm in this massive building. I'm like, oh my gosh, this place is huge. Cincinnati, I'd only been there for Reds baseball games. Massive city for me. And then the second interview turned into a third, and the guy said, hey, could you stay for lunch? I'm like, sure. Next thing you know, I've got these old guys taking me to lunch. I'm having lunch with these guys. Matt, I'm completely naive that this isn't normal. And he said, hey, while you're here, if you don't mind, would you mind taking a test for us? I'm like, I guess. So I go in this room and they give me a test. I'm like, oh my gosh, what kind of test? It's like this 36 question test, and I had an hour to do it, and I cranked through that. He said, give me a few minutes, let me go grade things. He came back and he said, hey, if you still got time this afternoon, I'd like you to go meet so-and-so, manager, so-and-so director. Well, by the time I finished that evening, he said, hey, let's come here, want to reimburse you. I said, sure. He said, well, okay, did you stay at the Omni? I said, no, I stayed at a Holiday Inn in Northern Kentucky. And the manager looked at the HR guy. He said, so we didn't put Rick up in the Omni? And he could tell, I could tell it was getting really awkward. He said, so who booked this hotel? I said, well, it's my money. So I booked the cheapest one I could find, Holiday Inn. So I drove up, and he went, oh my gosh, Rick, so he starts apologizing because, they should have picked me up. They should have done all these things. And so I finish up, and so I call this fraternity brother of mine. He said, how'd it go? And I explained it to him. He said, Rick, you went through a 6-month interview process in one day.
Oh my goodness.
Because Matt, it would have been interview, come back, take the test, come back, go do the management thing, come back. It would have been all this process. And the next week, I got a job offer. Man, it's the only company I interviewed with my senior year in college. And I didn't send him a resume. I just filled out a form that a friend referred. And it goes back to that relationship piece. The relationship with Charles got me the interview. And once I got into the interview, it wasn't my GPA, because I had to explain to him, Matt, I had 3 GPAs. I had a 4.0, a 3.5, and a 3.0. I remember this guy said, how do you have 3 GPAs? I said, well, I have my pre-business GPA, engineering, which means I have an overall 3.0. He went, okay. Then I have a 3.5 in business and I have a 4.0 in my major. And he just laughed. He said, I said, you're not, I've seen people like you. I get it. And so that's kind of how I ended up at P&G. Never interviewed for anyone else. That semester I finished up and started work. And about 6 months later, my wife graduated. At that time, was my fiance. She was looking for a job, and then she started in Cincinnati. And 3 months later, through a connection, she started working for P&G. And then here we are, these 2 young kids in Cincinnati working for P&G. And it was unlike anything we'd ever experienced, of this whole thing in front of us, of this massive, corporation. And with that, Matt, I sort of started all over again. It was very similar to me being in Kentucky as a freshman. I remember my boss, my first 6 months, said, if you don't lose that accent, I'm never going to take you on a customer call. I'm like, Matt, I've been working 4 years to get rid of my accent. It was gone. He said, nope. You got to get rid of that accent. And so then I began to learn to enunciate and to slow down, change a few of the words, kind of work through things. And so I had people at P&G just come alongside me and really kind of guide me through that first year or so to help me be successful.
So I know you ended up in Hong Kong and Bangkok for a couple couple of years internationally, but what did you do in the years leading up to that international assignment?
Yeah. So it, I tell people this, and then they kind of roll their eyes like, I don't get it, but this is Rick's perception that P&G would help you become an expert at being a general manager, but really being more of a generalist.
Hmm.
Okay, so what they were looking for, and this is primarily in the product supply, logistics, sales kind of organization that I was in. Um, Started out in customer service, product supply, manufacturing. It's that arm. Today it would be called supply chain, is where I started out.
Okay.
But what they were looking for was people that could manage and lead teams. So my first assignment was an accounting assignment. Yep. Okay. And so I did finance and accounting work related to, credit claims, invoicing, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
My next assignment went into distribution and logistics. We just did customer service and shipping and orders. After you get 2 assignments, then I got promoted. Then I was managing supervisors like me. But the very first day I started work, I think after 2 months of training, I had 5 people I was managing. And I remember the lady I was sitting with, her name was Roberta Swinefus. What a great name, Roberta Swinefus. And she looked at me, and then she looked back at her screen. These are terminals. She's typing away, and this keyboard's clicking. And without even looking back at me, she said, "Just so you know, we get a new one of you about every 18 months. My daughter's your age, and she's dating a punk just like you." She said,
Welcome to the team.
if you keep your mouth shut and you learn from us, you'll get along just fine. Am I clear? And I said, crystal, I get it. I get it. So young guy, 23 years old, managing a team of 5, then you get a couple of assignments, you get promoted to go from there. And so within that, continue to bounce around. I did a manufacturing assignment. And since my wife also worked for P&G, she was in corporate buildings, facilities management. It allowed me to get a manufacturing assignment and a couple of kind of business unit assignments without having to leave Cincinnati. So we stayed in Cincinnati for about 10 years doing various assignments, got promoted a couple of times, but it was primarily just managing people, managing processes to go through it. For my wife and me, we were like Chip and JoJo before that was cool. We rehabbed 5 houses before we had kids. So we were buying and selling houses and rehabbing, just enjoying that life. I'd be remiss to say that as you look at the childhood coming up, faith was a big part of that. And so for us, I was active in my faith as a young kid, as a Christian growing up. But for us as a couple, we really started to understand what it looked like to have your own personal faith. And so we're this young kids that are rehabbing homes, kind of going through things. We're working at P&G. We were a dink, right? Dual income, no kids, kind of going through. And then did a ton of work within our church in the area. So that was kind of these 3 facets of our life that we were kind of, lowering our head in. Then had a couple of kids. And after we had the second kid, realized at that point in time, I'd kept turning down chances to relocate because at some point in time to progress, I had to leave Cincinnati. We had our second kid. Kim took a spousal leave from P&G at the time. So we moved to Florida. Jacksonville, Florida, and Ponte Vedra Beach. And I did a customer team assignment. So instead of the Walmart team, it was the Winn-Dixie team down in the South. Had a great assignment there. And over that 10, 12-year period, I had maintained my relationship with Henry. So Henry Ho is my, co-founder, business partner for years. And we were running buddies back in the 80s when we first started. So we would meet at lunch and go run 4 or 5 miles and have a quick bite to eat. And we always, we did an investment club back in the day when investment clubs were cool. So became really, really good friends. And then he had a chance to relocate to Dallas to do work with the P&G team that was moving to Northwest Arkansas. I moved to Florida, was doing work with the Winn-Dixie team. And then he took a stint to Hong Kong to do work in Asia with Walmart. We stayed, connected through his relationship there. And then I reached the point at P&G where Kim and I said, listen, I don't want to go back to Cincinnati and work the corporate grind. I'd had a taste of working out in the field. I knew all roads led back to Cincinnati. And we had my wife's uncle had a um, interior decorating, home rehab, and paint shop at like this little small business in Kentucky. And we said, I think it's time for us to go out on our own. We loved the whole housing thing. We were kind of going down that path. We knew we could run a business. We're gonna buy the business from him. So I gave my letter of resignation when I was in Florida, Matt. Like, we're gonna go down this path. And then we just felt that after about 6 months of working through it, gave my letter of resignation on a Friday. That Saturday, woke up and just felt God telling us, "What are you doing?
Hmm.
Not the right time."
Hmm.
So I called my boss real quick and said, "Have you done anything with the letter yet?" He said, "No, it's still on my desk." I said, "Good. Throw away the letter." We took the sign from in front of our house that said "for sale." We're not going to do that. We're going to continue to stay where we are, but still realize we're just not happy with going back to Cincinnati. What are we going to do next? And so Henry gave me a call and said, "Listen, we are making some changes in Hong Kong. There's a role here. Would you be interested?" Like, sure, why not take a look? And within a month of me rescinding the resignation, um, we were in Hong Kong for a look-see visit.
Hmm.
And the rest just kind of became this snowball. So we moved to Hong Kong in I should know this, 1998, just after the handover back from Britain, from Britain to China. And I started an assignment there with Henry. And I had all of Walmart from a logistics standpoint, from South Korea, all the way down to Australia. And so I had a travel job, was gone all the time, Matt. It wasn't like you could go to a country like you could fly to Atlanta or Dallas today. It took a day of travel to get anywhere. And so I had a travel job for a couple of years. And then as things started to progress with the company, they started reducing expat assignments. Henry came back to Northwest Arkansas to work on the Walmart team. I re-upped for a second assignment, which took me to Bangkok. So I did 2 years in Hong Kong, which is fantastic. Moved to Bangkok. Still had a regional assignment, but more of a country focus in Thailand. And the company was looking for a couple thousand volunteers to raise their hand and take a package. And, Henry and I had always talked about doing business together, and Kim and I had already had the bug, what would it look like? And he had another friend of his here, Bill Waitsman.
Yeah.
And the three of us got on the phone and said, "All right, what would it look like if we started something?" And I said, "Listen, I don't know the first thing about Northwest Arkansas. I've been there twice to meet with Walmart, so I really don't know much about the vibe there." And so I just listened to Bill and Henry kind of pitch their idea on what they wanted to go do. And Henry's comment to me was, he said, "Hey, Bill is a fantastic customer guy. He's a relationship guy. He gets the pulse. He can manage customers over here. Henry is a great strategy guy. He said, we need someone to come and run the company." And I said, "I don't know." I said, "Hey, just come back when you're home and home leave. Come back, do a visit." So we came back to the States in the summer for home leave. I'd already, talked to my wife, and we came in and looked at it and said, "I think this is something we could go do." So we resigned. And for the three of us, we took a separation package. And so Matt, P&G became our angel investor. So we took our packages, which gave us each one more than a year's worth of salary.
Okay.
So we could start the company and not have to worry about compensation for a year. Now, I take you to that point in my life, which is, so Henry, lifelong friend, we're going to be business partners with Bill. But at that time, I'm in Bangkok, communicating back and forth. I'm 1 year into a 3-year assignment. So I resigned from the company. The package that I had, the contract I had, meant that they would relocate me back to the States. So I was taking care of that. But Matt, we were just in the process of adopting our daughter from China. So I want you to think about that period of time. It's 2001. And we were coming back to the States. And I can remember, Kim and I looked at our youngest and said, "Well, don't have a house, don't have a car. Dad really doesn't have a job. Welcome to our family." And then 2 weeks after adopting her, Kim moved back to the States with her kids. I moved back in, and we kind of lowered our head to start this thing called North Star, which is really a P&G version. Well, we took the P&G version of multifunctional teams, and we wanted to do that with the kind of next tier customers that were here.
Hmm.
So we did logistics work, we did, category management work, we did some selling, there's some brokerage part of that. We did marketing work, really whatever those teams would need, because at that time, Matt, very few teams had anyone other than a salesperson and analyst here in Northwest Arkansas. So we kind of became that team, started staffing up to go do that. But the interesting part about it is I moved back in September 1st. I remember Henry and I were on our very first business trip to see our first client. We were going to fly to Orlando. We were staying with friends because we had no money. We didn't want to spend anything on hotels, right? So you did that. And so we flew through Memphis. We got to Memphis and their flight was canceled. And we're like, great, we're going to miss our very first client call we've ever had, Matt. So we walked down the hall. And as we walked down the hall, we said, well, let's grab something to eat. We walked into this little cafe and we saw the second plane hit the World Trade Center.
Oh my goodness.
So left our jobs. We're going to go start this business. We started on September 1st. On September 11th, the world changed. So we leave there, walk to the Hertz rental car. There's a guy here. His name is Doug Walker. He saw Henry, said, Henry, I've got a car, jump in. He stood on top of the car. I said, who's going to Northwest Arkansas? And this guy said, hey, can you drop me off in Conway? This stranger jumped in the car, and we listened to AM radio for 6 hours as we're trying to go back home. And for the next 6-9 months, Matt, we just had a lot of lunches and visioning. Everything dried up. I can remember my father-in-law, having that conversation, like, what? Like, how are you going to survive? So the separation package from P&G, this literally helped us survive, because we started a business in what would be argued even today, the worst possible time to start a business, on September 11th. That's when we started.
Was it tempting to walk away and to go back to that safer life?
Well, for us,
How scared were you, and how close did you come?
Let's talk about Rick and Kim versus Henry and Bill. So Henry and Bill living in this area, you can imagine their bosses and their peers were always like, how you doing? Are you okay? You need to come back. I mean, there was that temptation that was there. That would have been very difficult for any one of us because the package, the way it worked out. For me, I had 2 opportunities. I had a chance to do this, but also at my home church in Florida, they were asking me to come back and be a men's ministry, kind of a business manager, to help manage a school and do a couple of things at the church. So we said, well, we could still go do that. And so we really debated it. But then after some long conversation said, let's give it a year and let's see what happens. So if you can remember back in those days, after about 6 months, things started to kind of get back to normal. We got the first client, then we got the second client, and we realized we can go do this. And so by the end of the year, we had 3 or 4 employees. We're kind of moving along, and actually had some, checks coming in. And the words of Steve Graves, who gave us the best advice ever, he said, listen, Rick, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you're only as good as you invoice and collect. And so, Matt, we had actually invoiced and we had collected money. So everyone was breathing a little sigh of relief at that point in time. We were actually getting paid, and we could go do something. So we were still pretty conservative for the next year. And it was probably year 2 before we realized we had something. And that was really that, again, faith at work, trying to do business differently. We were going to manage the whole scenario different. We had devotions at work. We could share our faith at work. And it was just this really interesting time. And we wanted to do business different so that people could ask, why are you guys different? How does it play out? And I could tell them about my faith and what drove us and what made us, who we are today. So that was that interesting journey, that first couple of years or so. And that was the early North Star years.
So as you began to taste success, how did the business change? What did you learn in those early days after you kind of got over the hump and started to make real money? How did North Star as a company change in terms of its scope of work?
So if I was getting into the business advice to people, and you hear this and you read about it in books, but you don't believe it. And it, sure enough, people were right. Um, Once you create something, you have to feed it.
Hmm.
And I'll use J&J as an example. We did a ton of work for J&J. We did all their customer marketing work here. And it was a big piece of business. We were really successful at what we were doing. We started doing work for the Walgreens team. And so the J&J corporate said, hey, that's great. How are you going to expand this? Then we started doing the same thing for Novartis. All of Novartis customer marketing work. We started doing work with other, other retailers, other customer teams. And then Novartis said, hey, we want you to take all of our customer marketing work, but we need you to have an office here in Parsippany. You got to have a person staffed in our location, staffed over here. And we started looking at each other and said, I don't think this is what we signed up for. And we thought this band of brothers, we're going to get 10, 12 people. We're going to go grow this thing. It's going to be fantastic. And what you realize is that to stay a boutique business is really hard if you're successful, because you got to feed it. And then all of a sudden your clients are asking more and asking more. Then you got to hire more people and do more work. Next thing you know, you're at 30, 40 people.
You built a monster.
And you have to keep feeding it, right? Yeah. As you're going through it. So what we learned pretty quickly is that this concept of 10, 12 employees, the three of us, boutique business, we're going to have to start turning down business. And we made a decision at that point in time to continue to grow. And so that was really hard. It wasn't what we planned on. Listen, it was a good thing, but it became difficult. And then I left a travel job. I mean, I remember my daughter looking at or having a conversation with my wife in Bangkok. He said, Mom, Dad's sort of like a friend of the family, right? Well, she said, well, he's your dad. Well, you guys are friends. I said, well, yeah. It's not like a real dad because we don't really see him that often.
Oh my gosh.
And you're like, oh my gosh. And so what I realized, I'm back here again and I'm traveling all over the place. And to scale a boutique business, and you've found this as well, Matt, you go into the boardroom and like, well, where's Matt? Where's Rick? Well, I had 4 other clients I was spending time with. Well, why don't we reschedule when Rick could be here?
Right.
And so you can't send junior people in to do the type of work that we were doing. Then you had to start hiring people like me, which is really expensive. And we just realized it was going to be hard to scale. So because of that, we needed to start scaling it in a different way that could let us grow with the current clients as opposed to keep getting new clients. So that's when we started doing the brokerage piece. That's why we did some logistics and distribution pieces of this. We jumped into research. My wife started running the research arm, Core 4 Research. Okay. That was really started, Matt, because our clients kept saying, go manage research, go manage research. And there was no firm here in Northwest Arkansas that did research. It was all entities in Chicago, New York, Miami. So we started that. So now we got a research company, we got a marketing company, a logistics company, we got a warehouse, we're doing brokerage and sales, we're doing category management. I mean, it just became this. And then all it would take is one new client. You're like, crap, we've got to like scale again. And so the scaling part continued to really push upon us. And at some point in time, remember, I signed up to be kind of guy who would run things. We were running 5 LLCs, and they were 5 legit companies. And it was just getting like this, and that you could feel the pressure of the scaling part of it. And then, you've talked to enough people to realize all it takes is 1 or 2 clients to walk away. And because you've got people dedicated to those clients, we started experiencing our first foray into laying people off.
Yeah.
Client A left. Oof, that's hard. Well, hey, can I do it? Well, I mean, you were dedicated to this, and that was hard. So that was really hard. So that was the first 6, 7, 8 years of our upbringing. And in this area, we were known as North Star. We were the guys. Bill went off to start a couple other things. So he left. Henry and I continued to run down that path. And then around 2009, we were doing quite a bit of research and realized that we're all over the place. My wife's flying all over the country to do research inside of stores. The iPhone had just come out. The good old iPhone 3S had just popped out. And we were wondering if anyone was using the phone to capture information inside of a store. And Matt, they weren't. The business model at the time was to get downloads and have someone click on an ad. And so we played around with the idea for 3 or 4 months and said, there's got to be someone. And sure enough, you Google it, you look, and no one's using the phone to capture information. So we launched a sixth company, or kind of a sixth LLC, if you will, Field Agent. And it was really going to be a tool for our research arm. Launched in April 2010, first app on iTunes to pay cash, first one to capture data this way. And after about 6-9 months, we realized this is the first company we could scale that didn't require Rick and Henry to be in the boardroom. So we got rid of the warehouse, got rid of logistics, got rid of that. Brokerage arm went over here with this group. We acquired the research company underneath Field Agent. We got rid of the marketing arm, and we lowered our head and said, Field Agent is the one that we can scale. And now 10 years later, we're in 6 other countries, growing really well. But again, I'm so unnecessary to this company right now. They're like, Rick who? Which is fantastic from a scaling standpoint, right? Because you can grow and land clients without me being in the boardroom.
What did Field Agent get right early on? Because I know it quickly became a pretty crowded space with a lot of other people wanting to use the phone in similar ways. But what gave you that long lead early? What did you get right?
I'll take you back to my roots again, okay? I learned a couple of sayings that stuck with me all my life. And one of them is kind of a life saying with me is that let your yes be yes and your no be no. Do not live in the world of maybe. Maybe's terrible, Matt. Hey, Mr. Buyer, you going to buy this? Maybe. And you go, but hey, he said maybe. It's the worst thing in the world. Just tell me yes or tell me no. The other aspect that is that shiny objects eventually become dull. So there's 2 analogies, right? Yes be yes and your no be no. Don't live in the world of maybe. Shiny objects can become dull. So what we realized pretty quickly, where we were unique, we were practitioners that were solving a problem. So when we dealt with the client knew, we knew what we were doing, okay, which is really important. When we said we were going to go do something, we did it. And we told a lot of our clients, potential clients, no, we couldn't go do something. Where competition was trying and failing, and they were giving things away, and they had a really shiny object. I remember one client, I think it was Kellogg's, that was this RFP, they wanted us all to fly in, so I fly in, and there's 3 of us in the lobby. You get your competitors in there, and I go last, and I walk in and out, and the guy pulled me aside and said, listen, you're the only guy today that has a clue how our business runs. Only guy. He said, love what you're doing, amazing quality, you guys get it, we have to use the data for this. He said, but I got to be honest with you, these other 2 guys are giving it away, and I know their results are going to be crap, but I got a purchasing guy in there, and we're going to take them, and about a year when the contract comes out, we'll come back to you. Do you know what happens, Matt? The other analogy is we fix $3 haircuts. Listen, I'm not a $100 haircut, but I'm not a $3 haircut. And that $3 haircut is when you walk in and your spouse says, ooh, you can leave your hair that way?
Right.
So what happened in our competition, they were very, very shiny. Guys out of Silicon Valley saw what we were doing, pivoted, hit it, threw up the app. Couldn't tell you what a PDQ versus
right. They didn't have context.
No context at all. And hey, we'll do it for $3. Well, they were paying someone $5 to do it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Matt, if you took on $15-20 million, you're just buying revenue. And we kept telling our clients that you realize how bad, yeah, I know, but it's better than what we had, and it's really, really cheap. So in many cases, as we told our organization, our objective was to continue to have an amazing reputation, to stand for what is right, and to be the last person standing. And that's kind of where we are today. Our business continues to grow because we are the go-to. Again, there's a few people that stick their head in here, and I'm not saying there aren't people that do good work, because things have evolved over the years. But that first 5-6 years were just shiny objects everywhere, and people were chasing price. And I would argue we made the right decision. We didn't go there, drop it down and try to go do something and face financial issues or say we could do something we couldn't do.
Were there ever significant missteps that created existential threats? And if so, how did your team really come through when they had been tested that way?
Yeah, I think for us, looking at the way the business model is laid out, I'm a Rails guy. Yeah, so here are the rails, play within the rails, don't go too far right or left. If you do, let's move the rails. Don't go play out here and then jump back in again. Um, and so as we started to do some work, I probably held us back a couple of times on things that we could have moved the rail that would have been a little riskier than probably I was ready for us to take. And in hindsight, we've kind of, ended up going down that path a little bit on the rails. And so that's kind of a generic way of saying we are probably a little bit too cautious. But I
Hmm.
think on the other side of it, where we kind of made a misstep here or there, um, our business is such that um, the 24/7, the access to scaling, the speed at which we do things, um, is a tremendous competitive advantage for us. I mean, it's like
Hmm.
you want something this afternoon, tomorrow you can make that happen. There are times that we probably went down that path so hard and so fast that as people started to scale with us, we realized I couldn't really do that in a day or 2 days. I needed like a week or so.
Hmm.
So, case in point, I can be in every single Walmart in a matter of, a couple of days. Someone say, "Hey, I need you to be in, $15,000 generals this week." Well, that's hard,
Hmm.
and I need a weekend or so. So from a team standpoint, we were selling and pushing on we can 24/7, we can go hit it. And that's still true. We're still near real time. And we could still hit those $15,000 general stores in a matter of a couple of weekends because it would take somebody else a month or two to hit it. But the team had to kind of rally around that because that was so much in our DNA that we're talking about hours that it's okay to say, but for this scale with our model, give me a weekend. And so we had to kind of, rally around that a little bit and not realize that's a failure. It wasn't a failure at all. It was just a different type of scope of what we were trying to go do. We had to kind of learn from that and not apologize for it and still turn that into a positive, which is we're not, a month or two, we're 2 weeks, but we're also not a week, we're 24 hours.
Yeah.
And so we had to kind of rally around that.
I know you all played internationally relatively early, and
Right.
I'd love to know, did those opportunities find you, or did you go looking for them?
They found us, and we took on a Series A investment in 2013 with a follow-on in 2015. And our private equity guys pushed early on saying, don't get too enamored with international because outside of China and India, everyone is looking for the US to be the big country. So when someone says, hey, let's go to Romania or let's go to the UK or let's go to Australia, that's all good, but they're like a small state. And so they gave us really good advice on those lines. And so part of that coaching had us go down the kind of the Chick-fil-A route of a distributorship as
Hmm.
opposed to us having company stores. So um, our foray into the UK or into Africa was an individual that saw what we were doing, vetted all the competitors, and realized field agents obviously the one I want to go use. And so what we do is that we manage and control the brand and technology, and they manage the sales, marketing, and operations and the people. So if you think of Chick-fil-A, if you bought a Chick-fil-A store tomorrow, you realize that um, you really manage the people and the sales, but Chick-fil-A owns the technology, they own the fryers, they own the building, they go drive it. So it stays on point to the Chick-fil-A brand. But how successful you are is really you. Now Chick-fil-A is going to help you, but they're not really running the store. And so we chose that model. So the 6 locations we have today, Matt, are entrepreneurs, business people. Most of them had a marketing background or a marketing company
Hmm.
and wanted to expand into something like this, knew that would take them, months, if not years, to do the technology, to do it right. They wanted the technology, they wanted the brand. And so we came alongside. So completely autonomous from what we're doing outside of the brand and technology, which allows us to focus on our core business here. Now, Canada and Mexico is a little bit different because you can imagine we do quite a bit of North American type of projects.
Hmm.
And so we do a ton of things together, but it's still autonomous.
So we're seeing unprecedented acceleration of change in terms of how consumers are shopping and purchasing, and you
Right.
spend your time as an organization really watching people and listening to people. And I'm just curious what kind of clues you're getting from those engagements with brands and with shoppers as to what the future looks like.
Um, I think Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. Okay, so
Hmm.
let's start with that premise. Um, we as a people are pretty darn adaptable. We just are, Matt. And what we see in talking with our clients and what we see with data coming back in is that we're pretty resilient, pretty adaptable. So while I'll use COVID as an example, while COVID came in, caused all kinds of problems. Um, sure, we'll see a surge and we'll see some things kick in again this spring, but I don't sense from either agents that we have or clients that we have that people are worried. It's just they're frustrated.
Hmm.
March of last year, everyone's worried going through it. So what we start to see is that the adaptability happens is that, I'm not going to do delivery. I'd never do that pickup thing. Well, maybe I will do that now. Maybe that's not going to be such a bad thing. I mean, I'll often tell people about Amazon, say, oh my gosh, Amazon is this. I said, remember, Amazon was just an internet version of the Sears Wish book.
Hmm.
I mean, you think about that. Nothing new under the sun, Matt.
Yeah.
People have been buying clothes from the newspaper. Sears would advertise in the newspaper. People have been buying clothes from Sears and JCPenney from their catalogs for years. People are like, I don't know if I could buy clothes on the internet. Are you kidding me?
Right.
People have been buying clothes unseen for decades.
Yeah.
They just automated this thing.
Hmm.
And so what you start to find from the whole delivery thing, we used to have the milkman and used to have other deliveries and things. It's just going back to what we've done before. So again, people are resilient. They're pretty much adaptable. I feel very confident going into 2021 that while we may have some conservatism in spend, I think people are going to be okay. I think they've learned to adapt and they're leaning into it. And this whole delivery pickup thing, I mean, it is definitely the future. I don't know that my daughter, who has two kids, is ever going to get out and go into a store again as long as she can pull her minivan in and someone dump a bunch of stuff in the back of her van. Like, Dad, why do I ever need to walk in there again? And I like shopping online. So
Yeah.
I think you're going to see that resilience kind of jump in again. Now, it's a pendulum, right, Matt? Things will jump back over and people are going to go back in stores. But I sense that.
In the early days of Field Agent, your capabilities were mostly used in terms of compliance checking. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was
You're right.
modular sets and in stock and price checks and so forth, more compliance oriented. And now you're doing things like ratings and reviews. And where is Field Agent heading directionally in terms of kind of redeploying the existing capabilities in ways that maybe you didn't even see coming?
So Matt, let's go down that scaling aspect again, right? So scaling is important. Stay within your rails. So the rails we have on our team today, the first one is the technology or platform is something we've got to continue to develop and make products within that platform. The agent base, those millions of consumers that have downloaded our app and are engaging, how can we continue to feed them? So if I take the technology, mobile technology, and the kind of the back end we have along with the people, the question now is how do I scale that left to right? And then, as you know, and you've seen this kind of evolve, everything from you even look at a Walmart today that's doing self checkout in every location as opposed to you know some doing cashiers. You realize that people are pretty efficient inside of stores. So what happens with us is that we started down left hand side and we started going right to say if you can go in and take a photo and audit. What if I sent in a core consumer that's 18 to 35-year-old female? So when that she's giving me the price of cosmetics, she'll actually answer a question, which means it's research. So boom, second vertical research. Well, while she's there, let's have her go to an Ulta, talk to a beauty advisor, and see what the beauty advisor says. Boom, mystery shopping, different vertical. Let's take that same 18 to 35-year-old. You know what, Matt? I'll bet she would buy something and try it. Buy and try. You know what else I bet she would do? I bet she would buy and try and tell me about it, kind of in-home use test. I bet she would buy and try and write about it, digital demo sampling we have. And I bet you she would buy and try it and do a ratings and review. That sounds pretty good too. So we kept going left to right. Now, what's happening with it, with the amount of hands-on in the stores, and I'm not saying we're going to go down the arms and legs side here, but you start to realize that with pickup and other things happening inside the store, shoppers are expected and it's understood that they're going to do more and more inside of stores.
Hmm.
So we want to continue to go on that vertical. And now we're spending more time talking to retailers saying, how can your shoppers help you? One of the best assets you have, obviously, are your employees. And we're not saying that's not the case. But what happens if you have a trained employee that's doing really high value added work? And what if there are initial tier two, tier three types of pieces of work? Could someone go do that? So something as simple as, do you really have to have associates check the bathroom every 35, 40 minutes to tell me if it's clean?
Hmm.
Maybe.
Hmm.
Could someone actually walk to a shelf and say, gosh, could I straighten it up? Maybe. So as we go in that vertical left to right, there are a tier of people that would never do that. There's also a tier of people that says, gosh, I've checked the price. I told you about compliance. I bought a couple of products and this store is a mess and I kind of straightened something up. So you see kind of that left to right. Now what hasn't changed is the technology is there to make sure we QC it, to understand it. The platform stays the same. That agent base really doesn't change. So we think we can continue to go left to right from a retailer perspective. And then suppliers are the same way. Suppliers are asking more and more, say, well, gosh, if that's the case, Rick, you've already got data collection, you've got mystery shopping and research. Now you have sampling. You're doing a ton of sampling. I don't have to send samples. They can go buy something inside of a store. But what if someone would tell me about their recipes and how they used it inside of their home? And could I re-engage them a little bit, Matt? And maybe that would, so you see, it's just that continuum left to right. So we think we can continue to scale the technology and we continue to scale the people that are doing this work and staying somewhat within our rails without having to go all the way to this other extreme that says, hey, can you, train someone to go work on TVs and have them go buy a bunch of tools and, become electronic certified? No, you have employees and technical people here, and you've got everyday people that are here that can do more and more. And I think you're going to see that coming out of Field Agent.
How do you want to be? How do you want to be known and remembered as a human being, as an entrepreneur? Any context of life? How do you want to be remembered? How do you want people to know you?
Yeah, I'd love to do that good guy. I mean, I look at my family, and I like to be introduced as that I'm a husband of one, dad of three, and granddad of two. I mean, so that's part of it. We'll get to the business side in a second. I think a man of faith is there. That's what drives me day in and day out. That faith is there, and it's core to who I am. I'd love to say the good guy thing kind of gets in there, but that's not. I mean, anyone can be called a good guy. But when I look at it from the business perspective, if I've learned anything over the years, which gets back into the relationship part, I want to be known for the guy that was available to others to help them kind of move along their own continuum. A guy that is available to help, a person that is willing to look at others versus himself. And I'm not trying to portray to someone to say, follow my path. And I'm not trying to drive it. I really want to be the person that could sit down with a Matt Pfeiffer and talk about life and give you some perspective without trying to put my own twist on it, but just kind of help you think through it. The same thing from a business standpoint, Matt, as you can imagine, the number of businesses that come through and just talk to us. I want to be an encourager to what they're trying to go do and not tell them not to go left or right, but to have them say, if this is where you're going to go, this is what I would go do. So I want to be someone that's seen as, caring for others and being a part of their journey. If they've done that from a business standpoint, that's good. Now, internally, it's a little bit different, as you know, running teams and organizations, that the legacy, you want someone to come back and say 10, 15 years from now, hey, when Rick was here, he probably wouldn't let us go down this path because we're just wishy-washy and it's a maybe. And if Rick was here, he would tell us we're just going in circles again. We need to stay within our rails. So some of those Rickisms, I'm hoping kind of stays along. So it's less about Rick, but it's more of these principal truths that are kind of going along. And that's kind of broad way of looking at it. I struggle with the whole legacy thing, and I get why people, look to that. But that's kind of where I am.
Is there anything in any context of your life that you have, um, yet to accomplish that motivates you to continue playing the game hard?
Playing the game hard that's a tough one there. I I have told our team this, and you may or may not believe it, Matt, but we're going to throw this one out here. Uh, I think I'm one of the least competitive people you'll ever meet.
Hmm.
Listen, I want to win, but if I don't, I'm not wallowing. I mean, it's not who I am to go in. I want to fight that good fight, get in there and engage, to go do that. So if I look at me going forward in this, um, in talking with others, I'd love to be able to come alongside other companies and help them kind of fast track or kind of accelerate their thinking and where they are with organizations and with teams. So if I was still here in Northwest Arkansas 10 years from now, and Matt Pfeiffer sent to me 10 different young CEOs that are starting companies, and I could go pour into them for a finite period of time, not forever, for a couple of months. I think that's kind of the next big thing for me. As it relates to business, I spend, quite a bit of time telling people, no, no. I am not going to do another startup, Matt. I'm telling you, it is for the faint of heart, not for the faint of heart. I'm not going to do another startup. That doesn't mean that when you've got something that's got some legs under it, you couldn't jump into it, but you know what it's like.
Yeah.
It's nights and weekends. It's a pound of flesh.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this now on the entrepreneurial side for almost 20 years.
Hmm.
And so coming in at a different stage makes a ton of sense. But I don't think I would go flip the lights on and say, hey, let's go get a band of guys and go do the startup. That's for the youth that are out there. But the youth that you send to me realize they don't know what they don't know. I think I'm a pretty good judge of character and where things are. I think I could come alongside them.
Yeah. Well, you've had a remarkable journey. It's been a lot of fun getting to spend time with you, getting to know you better. My last question is, has it been fun? From the going to college, fish out of water, and everything you did to join P&G and see the world and start businesses and learn from mistakes and kind of the season that you're enjoying now with the success of a field agent. On the whole, has it been fun?
It has been, Matt. I look back on my life, and other than me not going to Keith Pigg's wedding, which is one life regret, when I was 23, and not going to Mike Moppin's funeral, who is a friend of mine in college that I should have driven to, that passed away when I was 21. Those are, I'm still frustrated that I didn't go to that wedding and that funeral. So I'm not a regret guy. Okay. I'm not a regret guy there. So I look at my life, and it's been a ton of fun. I don't think I'd change a thing where we are. It's been fantastic where we are. I'm a positive guy, go can do. I'm a push go as fast as you can. Let's go do it. And so because of that, I don't dwell on the past, and I look back on my past and see very few regrets and very few really bad moments. Even that whole scenario of 9/11, I look back on that and said, man, what an adventure. That was cool. That was fun. We were kind of going through it. So that's kind of my personality. But when I look at the fun part of it, even today at the stage we are with Field Agent, growing organization, I've got an amazing management team. Listen, they don't need me. They'd like me to be around, which I appreciate. But I still go in virtually, don't go in, but I still go in virtually every single day today. And I still have a lot of fun. It's invigorating. I see that we have so much potential in front of us. And so I get up in the morning excited to go to work. When it changes, as you know, Matt, time for me to change.
Well, Rick West, husband of one and father of three, granddaddy of two, and friend to many. It has been so much fun getting to know you better. Thank you so much for making this investment of your time. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.
Matt, my pleasure, man. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, Rick.